Good day, everyone. Before we talk about methods, designs, or data, let's pause for a moment and reflect on why we do research at all. Research is not just about numbers or narratives, it is about curiosity with discipline, questions with purpose, and evidence with impact. Every meaningful change in education, policy, and society begins with someone brave enough to ask what is really happening here and how can we understand it better. Today, we step into research design not as a rigid formula, but as a compass, one that helps us navigate complexity, uncertainty, and human experience. Whether you are a graduate student beginning your thesis or a practitioner seeking answers to real world problems, this journey is about thoughtful choices that honor both rigor and relevance. Let's begin by let's begin this journey by laying the foundation. Allow me now to share my slides. Research design, quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods. The title slide introduces us to the central theme of the presentation, research design as a comprehensive guide for conducting systematic inquiry in education and the social sciences. It frames research design not as a technical afterthought, but as the backbone of the entire research process, from framing questions to interpreting results. Beyond this title, this slide signals an important mindset shift. Research design is not just about choosing a method, it's about aligning your purpose, questions, and assumptions. Whether you work with statistics, stories, or both, your design choices shape the kind of knowledge you produce and the credibility of your conclusions. At a deeper level, this reminds us that research design is both strategic and ethical. A well designed study respects participants, uses appropriate tools, and produces findings that others can trust and build upon. Design is where intention meets execution. As we move forward, keep this question in mind. What kind of understanding am I seeking? And what design will best help me reach it? This leads us directly into the foundation of rigorous research. The foundation of rigorous research. We define research design as the overall framework that guides how a study is planned, conducted, and analyzed. It emphasizes that design decisions influence every stage of research: what questions are asked, what data are collected, and how results are interpreted. Expanding on these, think of research design as a blueprint. Just as an architect wouldn't build without a plan, a researcher shouldn't collect data without a clear design. A strong design ensures coherence. Your questions match your methods, and your methods match your analysis. Importantly, these introduces the three major approaches used in educational and social research: quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods. Each approach serves a different purpose. None is inherently superior. Their value depends on the problem you are trying to solve. As we transition, the next step is to understand the worldviews behind these approaches, because how we design research is deeply tied to how we understand reality itself. Understanding research paradigms. We introduce the idea of research paradigms, or the philosophical assumptions that guide how we view reality and knowledge. It contrasts three approaches: quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods. Quantitative research assumes a single objective reality that can be measured using numbers and statistics. Qualitative research recognizes multiple realities shaped by human experience and meaning. Mixed methods intentionally integrates both to gain a more comprehensive understanding. To deepen these, paradigms influence not just methods, but mindset. They shape what we consider valid evidence, how we interpret findings, and even how we position ourselves as researchers. Understanding paradigms help us make intentional, defensible choices rather than default ones. As we move forward, we begin our first deep dive, starting with the approach that many researchers encounter first: quantitative research design. Quantitative research design. This is the beginning of research designs and signals a focused exploration of quantitative research design. It prepares the audience, us, for a structured, measurement driven approach to inquiry. Quantitative research is especially powerful when we want to test hypotheses, measure outcomes, or generalize findings to larger populations. It's commonly used in program evaluation, policy studies, and experimental research. At a deeper level, this section is about precision and control. Quantitative designs aim to reduce bias, isolate variables, and produce findings that are replicable. This makes them especially influential in decision-making contexts. Next, we clarify exactly what quantitative research design is and what makes it distinct. Defining quantitative research. We need to define quantitative research as an approach focused on measuring variables, testing hypotheses, and analyzing numerical data. It is rooted in positivist philosophy, which assumes that reality can be observed objectively and measured independently of the researcher. Expanding on these, quantitative research emphasizes structure and standardization. Designs are pre-planned, instruments are consistent, and procedures are carefully controlled. These allows researchers to compare results across groups and contexts. The key or the important uh, characteristics listed here is large samples, standardized tools, statistical analyses. These are not just technical choices. They are strategies for achieving objectivity, reliability, and generalizability. However, this also means quantitative research may sometimes miss nuance or context. So the natural next question is, when is quantitative research the right choice? That is exactly where the next slide takes us. When to use quantitative methods. The These outlines the situations where quantitative methods are most appropriate. Testing hypotheses, measuring outcomes, generalizing findings, and examining trends over time or across groups. To deepen this, quantitative methods are ideal when your research question begins with to what extent, what is the status, or is there a relationship. They are especially valuable when decisions require numerical evidence, benchmarks, or comparisons. At the same time, we need to remind ourselves that method choice should always be question driven, not preference driven. Using quantitative methods simply because they feel more scientific can lead to misalignment and weak conclusions. As we move ahead, we need to walk through the specific quantitative methodologies from experiments to surveys that bring these principles to life in real research contexts. So, overview of quantitative methodologies. This gives us a big picture map of quantitative research methodologies. It reminds us that quantitative research is not a single method, but a family of designs, each suited to different research questions and contexts, ranging from experiments to surveys. Expanding on these, the value of these lies in helping researchers choose wisely. Too often, people jump straight into data collection without asking which methodology best fits their purpose. This overview helps prevent that by laying out 5 major options, each with a distinct logic and a level of control. At a deeper level, these signals an important principle: methodological alignment. The strength of a quantitative study depends not on complexity, but on how well the method matches the question. With this map in mind, we now zoom in on the first and most rigorous quantitative methodology: experimental research design. The experimental research design is often described as the gold standard for establishing cause and effect relationships. It emphasizes the deliberate manipulation of an independent variable while controlling for extraneous factors. To deepen this, experimental research is powerful because it allows us to confidently answer, does X cause Y? Through controlled conditions and systematic procedures, researchers can isolate the effect of an intervention, whether it's a policy change, program implementation, or teaching strategy. However, we also hint at responsibility here because experiments involve intervention. They require careful ethical consideration, thoughtful design, and clear justification. When done well, experimental research produces findings that can directly inform policy and practice. This leads us naturally to the building blocks that make experiments credible and trustworthy. Key components of experimental design. This slide breaks experimental research into four essential components: manipulation, control, randomization, and comparison. Together, these elements ensure that observed outcomes can be attributed to the intervention itself. Expanding further, manipulation gives the researcher an active role, while control minimizes the influence of outside variables. Randomization is especially critical too, as it reduces selection bias and strengthens internal validity by ensuring groups are comparable from the start. At a deeper level, these components work together as a system. If one element is weak or missing, the entire design is compromised. This reinforces that experiments are not just about treatment, they are about discipline, structure, and methodological integrity. Now we look at the different ways experiments can be structured in real research settings. Types of experimental designs. We need to distinguish between true experimental designs and quasi-experimental designs, outlining specific formats such as pre-test, post-test only, and Solomon 4 group designs. To expand on this, true experiments rely on random assignment, making them the strongest for causal inference. Quasi-experiments, while lacking full randomization, are often more practical and ethical, especially in educational and social contexts. The deeper insight here is that rigor exists on a continuum. While true experiments offer maximum control, quasi-experimental designs allow researchers to study real-world settings where ideal conditions are impossible. The key is transparency, clearly stating what the design can and cannot claim. With these structures in mind, the next question becomes, what are the trade-offs? That's exactly what our next slide addresses. Strengths and limitations of experimental design. We present a balanced view of experimental research, highlighting both its strengths, such as strong internal validity and replicability, and its limitations, including ethical concerns and reduced ecological validity. We remind ourselves that no design is perfect. While experiments excel at control, they may oversimplify complex human behavior or operate in artificial settings that differ from real life. And here we learn methodological humility. Strong researchers don't just celebrate the power of their methods, they acknowledge constraints and design responsibly around them. Knowing limitations doesn't weaken research, it strengthens credibility. This reflection prepares us to explore a different kind of quantitative approach, one that focuses on individuals rather than groups. Single subject research design. We introduce single subject research design, an approach centered on intensive, repeated measurement of individuals over time. It highlights designs such as AB that demonstrate experimental control within a single participant. In short, this is actually the equivalent of your case study in qualitative research. To deepen these, single subject designs are especially valuable in applied fields like special education, psychology, and behavior analysis. They allow researchers to tailor interventions, observe change directly, and make data-driven decisions at the individual level. At a deeper level, this slide challenges the assumption that bigger samples are always better. Single subject research prioritizes precision, responsiveness, and practical impact, especially when individual differences matter most. As we move forward, we will show how single subject designs vary and how they strengthen causal claims without relying on large samples. Let's look at common single subject design. We introduce the most common single subject research designs, including AB, ABA, ABAB, and multiple baseline designs. Each variation shows a different way of demonstrating experimental control at the individual level. The progression the progression sorry uh, from AB to ABAB reflects increasing methodological strength. Simply observing change after an intervention is useful, but withdrawing and reintroducing the intervention allows researchers to demonstrate that the change is truly caused by the treatment and not by chance or outside factors. At a deeper level, these designs reflect a logic of replication. Rather than relying on large samples, single subject research builds credibility through repeated, consistent patterns of change over time. As we move forward, we now shift from designs that manipulate variables to one that focuses on relationships rather than causation. And when we start talking about relationships, we talk about correlational research. Correlational research examines relationships between variables without manipulating them. It emphasizes a critical principle. Correlation does not equal causation. To deepen this, correlational research is especially valuable when manipulation is impossible or unethical. For example, we cannot assign students to experience anxiety or poverty, but we can study how these variables relate to academic performance. At a deeper level, correlational studies are powerful tools for prediction and theory building. While they cannot tell us why something happens, they can tell us what tends to occur together, providing a foundation for future experimental research. This naturally leads to a closer look at the type of relationships we can observe through correlation. Types of correlational relationships. We need to explain also three main types of correlations: positive correlation, negative, and no correlation. using clear, intuitive examples such as study time and test scores. Expanding on these, understanding direction matters because it shapes interpretation. A positive correlation means variables move together, while a negative correlation means they move in opposite directions. No correlation reminds us that not all variables are meaningfully related, even if we expect them to be. At a deeper level, this slide reinforces the importance of critical thinking. Humans are pattern seekers, and correlational data can tempt us into causal assumptions. We need to train ourselves to pause, to interpret carefully, and to avoid overclaiming. We examine how these relationships are quantified and interpreted statistically in the next slide, where we looked at correlation coefficients. Correlational coefficients, particularly Pearson's R, ranges from -1 to +1 and indicates both the strength and direction of a relationship. The absolute value of R tells us how strong the relationship is, while the sign tells us its direction. A correlation of -0.8 is just as strong as +0.8. It simply moves in the opposite direction. At a deeper level, we need to emphasize the difference between statistical significance and practical significance. A correlation can be statistically significant but trivial in real-world terms. Good researchers always ask, does this relationship actually matter? With correlational methods understood, we now move to a design that explores causes after the fact. Causal comparative research, ex post facto investigations. This slide introduces causal comparative research frameworks, also known as ex post facto research. It compares existing groups to explore possible causes of observed differences when manipulation is not possible. Expanding on this, causal comparative research is common in education and social sciences, such as comparing students who attended preschool with those who did not. The key is that the independent variable has already occurred. At a deeper level, this design sits between correlation and experimentation. It allows researchers to explore possible explanations while acknowledging that definitive causation cannot be claimed due to lack of control and random assignment. To clarify this distinction, the next slide will directly compare causal comparative research with experimental ones. Causal comparative versus experimental research. So let's directly contrast comparative and experimental research across key dimensions such as manipulation, group formation, and ability to establish causation. This comparison basically highlights a crucial trade-off: control versus feasibility. Control versus feasibility. Experimental research offers stronger causal claims, but may be impractical or unethical. Causal comparative research, on the other hand, sacrifices some control in exchange for real-world applicability. This reinforces a central theme which we have been saying for a long time. And what is it? Methodological fit. Methodological fit. The best design is not the most powerful one in theory. It is the one that responsibly answers the research questions within real constraints. As we move ahead, we need to introduce different types of quantitative researches further. One, and this time we will look at the survey method, one of the most widely used quantitative methodologies for describing populations and understanding large-scale patterns. But before we talk about survey research, let us consider first steps in causal comparative research. Sorry. So I want to walk you through the systematic steps involved in conducting causal comparative research, beginning with identifying a problem and ending with analyzing results. This shows that even without manipulation, the design still follows a rigorous structured process. The critical step here is group definition. That's the reason why causal comparative researchers always ask, is there a significant difference in this concept between X, where X stands for moderating variables such as age, gender, and the like. Because groups already exist, researchers must be especially careful in selecting participants and controlling for extraneous variables through matching or statistical controls. The credibility of the findings depends heavily on these decisions. We need to reinforce too that comparative research is about informed inference, not definitive proof. Researchers must interpret findings cautiously, clearly stating alternative explanations and even limitations. With this design complete, we now transition to one of the most widely used and most practical quantitative approach: survey research. Survey research. Survey research is a method for collecting data from samples to describe characteristics, attitudes, or opinions of a population. It emphasizes efficiency and scale, making surveys central to social science research. Expanding further, surveys allow researchers to reach large and diverse populations, often at relatively low cost. They are especially useful for capturing trends, perceptions, and self-reported behaviors across groups. At a deeper level, these highlights that survey research is not just about asking questions, it's about designing instruments that accurately represent complex human attitudes. Poorly designed surveys can produce misleading results, regardless actually of sample size. To better understand how surveys work over time, let's break down different types of survey designs. So we distinguish between cross-sectional and longitudinal surveys, as well as trend, cohort, and panel studies. Each type varies in terms of timing and purpose. Expanding on these, cross-sectional surveys provide a snapshot at one point in time, while longitudinal surveys track change and development. Trend studies examine population shifts. Cohort studies follow specific groups. And panel studies repeatedly survey the same individuals. At a deeper level, we need to underscore that time is a design decision at this point. Choosing the wrong survey type can limit what conclusions you can draw. Understanding these distinctions helps researchers align design with research goals. Let us explore the different ways surveys can be administered. And this comes with its own trade-offs. So let's look at the survey data collection methods as you can see in this slide. So there are four main data collection methods: face-to-face, telephone, mail, and online survey. No? These three. So at a deeper level, this reminds us that access equals representation. How you collect data shapes who gets included and whose voice may be missing. Ethical and inclusive research requires thoughtful method selection. Once data collection is decided, the next challenge would be asking the right questions in the right way. So let's look at designing effective survey questions. We will see this also when we go to instrument making. We outline the best practices for survey question design, emphasizing clarity, neutrality, and pilot testing. It also distinguishes between close-ended and open-ended questions. Close-ended questions make analysis efficient, while open-ended questions provide depth and nuance. Most strong surveys balance both, combining structure with space for participant voice. We also highlight that questions are measurements. Poorly worded questions introduce bias just as much as faulty instruments do in experiments. Good survey design is both a technical and ethical responsibility. With survey research covered, let us now bring to closure quantitative chapter as a whole. So, what do we get from quantitative research design? And this is the first set. So, we need to summarize the major lessons from the quantitative research section: choosing the right design, prioritizing validity, ensuring adequate sample size, and controlling for confounding variables. This reinforces that strong quantitative research is not about complexity, but about alignment. When questions, methods, and analysis work together, findings become meaningful and defensible. At a deeper level, this prepares us for a shift in perspective. Quantitative research excels at measurement and generalization, but it does not always capture meaning, context, or lived experience. And with that, we transition to the next set of qualitative research designs. Where we move from measuring the world to understanding it from inside out. Qualitative research designs. Mainit yung tsa ako. So we need to introduce qualitative research as an approach focused on understanding meaning, experiences, and perspectives, especially from the participants' viewpoints. So rather than measuring variables numerically, it explores human experiences through words, images, and observations. Qualitative research values depth over breadth. Instead of asking how often something occurs, it asks what it means, how it is experienced, and why it matters. This makes it especially powerful for studying complex social phenomena that cannot be reduced to numbers. We need to highlight here a philosophical shift. And what's this philosophical shift? Qualitative research recognizes that reality is socially constructed, shaped by context, culture, and interaction. Multiple realities can coexist, yes, and the goal is not prediction, but understanding. The goal is not prediction, but understanding. As we move forward, let us now see how this understanding unfolds in very unique research processes. The qualitative research paradigms. So here we present qualitative research process as an iterative, no? As an iterative cycle. Observation, documentation, analysis, interpretation, and refinement. Rather than following a linear path, qualitative research moves back and forth between data and meaning. This cycle reflects the emergent nature of qualitative inquiry. Researchers do not lock themselves into rigid designs. Instead, they remain open to new insights, returning to the data as understanding deepens. This reinforces that the researcher is not a distant observer, but an active instrument of inquiry. Reflexivity, sensitivity, and interpretation are not weaknesses. They are central to the rigor of qualitative research. This leads us naturally to an important question. When is qualitative research the right choice? So, when to use qualitative researches? We need to outline the situations where qualitative methods are most appropriate, exploring new phenomena, understanding context, capturing complexity, giving voice, generating theory, and explaining quantitative results. Qualitative research shines when we need to understand the how and why behind human behavior. It is particularly valuable when existing theories fall short or when marginalized perspectives need to be heard. We need to position qualitative research as a tool for meaning making. This allows us to speak, this allows participants to speak for themselves, making it especially important for education, community studies, and even social justice research. With this purpose cleared, the next step is to understand the major qualitative methodologies available to researchers. So, what are the different qualitative researches there? So, there are major traditions of qualitative research, including phenomenology, case study, ethnography, grounded theory, and narrative research. Each offers a distinct lens for examining human experience. These methodologies differ in their focus. Some center on lived experience, others on culture, theory development, and or stories over time. Understanding these differences helps researchers select methods that align with their research questions and philosophical stance. We need to reinforce that qualitative research is not one size fits all. Methodological choice is intentional and deeply connected to what the researcher wants to understand. We now begin our first deep dive into these traditions, starting with phenomenology or exploring lived experience. So the slide introduces phenomenology. It's a methodology focused on understanding the shared lived experiences of individuals related to a particular phenomenon. The goal is to describe the essence of that experience. Phenomenological research relies heavily on in-depth interviews, inviting participants to describe their experiences as fully and concretely as possible. The researcher seeks patterns across accounts to uncover common meanings. Phenomenology asks us to slow down and listen deeply. It values participants as experts of their own experience, and it seeks understanding without imposing external explanations. To do this well, phenomenology relies on specific methodological principles. Key features of phenomenology. The core features of phenomenology includes bracketing or epoche, focus on the essence of experience, intentionality, and rich description or very rich description. Expanding further, bracketing challenges researchers to set aside preconceived notions and approach the phenomenon with openness, while complete bracketing is debated. The practice encourages reflexive awareness. The emphasis on rich description allows readers to enter the experience themselves. Phenomenology does not just explain, it evokes understanding. As we move forward, the next slides will guide us through the phenomenological analysis process, showing how raw narratives are transformed into meaningful insights. The phenomenological analysis process. This walks us through the step-by-step process of phenomenological analysis, from data collection to writing an essence description. It shows how raw interview data is systemically transformed into meaningful insights. The process begins with in-depth interviews, typically with a small number of participants who have directly experienced the phenomenon. Researchers immerse themselves in the transcripts, reading and rereading to gain a holistic sense of the experience. At a deeper level, identifying meaning units and themes is not mechanical. It requires interpretive sensitivity. The final essence is a synthesis that captures what is shared and essential, not just individual stories. With phenomenology complete, we now shift to a methodology that examines experience within a bounded system. Case study research. This slide introduces case study research as an in-depth investigation of a bounded system such as an individual, organization, program, or community using multiple data sources. What defines a case study is context. The goal is not to isolate variables, but to understand how elements interact within real-life settings. This makes case studies especially valuable for program evaluation and policy research. At a deeper level, this highlights that case studies prioritize holistic understanding. By examining a case from multiple angles, researchers can capture complexity that other methods might overlook. To achieve this depth, case studies rely on diverse sources of evidence, which we intend to explain next. Data sources in case study research. So, there are multiple data sources used in case study research, and that includes interviews, observations, documents, audiovisual materials, and physical artifacts. Expanding on these, using multiple sources allows researchers to triangulate evidence, strengthening the credibility of your findings. What people say can be compared with what they do, what is documented, and what is observed. This slide reinforces that strong qualitative research is about convergence, not convenience. The richness of a case study comes from seeing the same phenomenon from different perspectives. This leads us to how researchers ensure rigor and credibility in case study work. Conducting rigorous case studies. We focus on quality criteria for rigorous case study research here. This includes clear case boundaries, triangulation, maintaining a chain of evidence, and member checking. Triangulation is central to qualitative research, and that's something to pay attention to. It means deliberately seeking converging evidence across data sources, methods, or perspectives. Discrepancies, therefore, are not ignored. They are examined and explained. This emphasizes trustworthiness over control. Rigor is in qualitative research comes from transparency, reflexivity, and systematic documentation. Rather than statistical tests. With case study methodology established, we now move to a tradition rooted in anthropology, ethnography. Ethnography is a methodology focused on understanding culture through prolonged fieldwork and participant observation. It seeks an insider view of shared beliefs, practices, and meaning. Ethnographers, therefore, immerse themselves in the daily lives of participants, often for months or years. This long-term engagement allows them to observe patterns that short-term studies might miss or miss. Ethnography, therefore, is about presence and patience. It requires balancing participation with analytical distance, being close enough to understand, yet reflective enough to interpret. To do this well, ethnography relies on several key conceptual tools. Key ethnographic concepts. So we introduce core ethnographic concepts here: culture, emic, ethic, and thick descriptions. The emic perspective captures the insider view. While the ethic perspective represents analytical interpretation. Strong ethnography weaves both together to create understanding that is authentic yet theoretically meaningful. At a deeper level, thick description goes beyond what happened. It explains why it mattered. It situates behavior within social, historical, and cultural contexts, allowing readers to truly grasp its significance. As we move forward, let's look into the ethnographic methods and types, showing how culture is systematically studied and even represented. Ethnographic methods and process. So let's outline the ethnographic research process, beginning with gaining entry and building rapport, followed by immersion, documentation, analysis, and representation. This shows ethnography as a long-term relational approach to research. Expanding on these, entry and rapport are not just logistical steps. We need to be careful. They are ethical commitments. Researchers must earn trust and negotiate their role within the community, which directly affects the quality of data collected. This highlights that ethnographic analysis happens through field work, not only at the end. Observations, reflections, and interpretations evolve continuously, shaping how culture is ultimately represented. As we move forward, we need to show that ethnography comes in different forms, each with distinct purpose and stance. So let's look at the different types of ethnography. So there are three types of ethnography: realist ethnography, critical ethnography, and autoethnography. Each reflects a different relationship between the researcher, participants, and knowledge produced. Realist ethnography emphasizes objectivity and description, while critical ethnography explicitly addresses power, inequality, and social justice. Autoethnography, in contrast, turns the lens inward, using personal experience to understand broader cultural phenomena. At a deeper level, this slide reminds us that methodology is never neutral. The type of ethnography chosen reflects the researcher's values, goals, and ethical commitments. With ethnography complete, we now transition to a methodology focused on theory building from data. Grounded theory. Grounded theory is a methodology that develops theory inductively from data through systematic coding and constant comparison. Unlike hypothesis-driven research, theory emerges during analysis. Grounded theory is especially useful when existing theories do not adequately explain a phenomenon. Researchers move from raw data to concepts, categories, and eventually a theoretical model grounded in empirical evidence. This approach values process and interaction. It seeks to explain how phenomena unfold over time, making it highly relevant for studying social processes, decision-making, and change. To understand how grounded theory works in practice, let's explain its coding processes. Grounded theory coding process. So there are three stages of grounded theory coding: open coding, actual coding, and selective coding. Each stage moves the analysis from description to conceptual integration. Expanding further, open coding breaks data into discrete parts. Actual coding connects categories. And selective coding integrates everything around a core category that explains the phenomena. This iterative coding process requires constant comparison and reflexive memo-writing. Analysis, in this case, is never linear. It evolves as new data challenge or refine emerging theory. Next, we examine how data collection itself is guided by theory development. theoretical sampling, and saturation. This slide introduces theoretical sampling, where data collection decisions are guided by the emerging theory rather than predetermined criteria. It also explains theoretical saturation as the point when no new insights emerge. Expanding on this, theoretical sampling means researchers intentionally seek participants or situations that can deepen, challenge, or clarify developing categories. Data collection and analysis happen simultaneously. In this case, saturation is not about quantity, it's about conceptual completeness. When categories are well defined and relationships are clear, theory is considered sufficient or sufficiently grounded. With grounded theory complete, we now move to a methodology centered on stories and meaning over time. We call that narrative research. Narrative research focuses on basically focuses on individual lives. Or individual life stories to understand experiences across time and context. It examines how people, for example, uh, how people construct meaning through the stories that they tell. Narrative research is particularly valuable for studying identity, turning points, and lived experience within social and historical contexts. It often involves working with one or a few participants in great depth. We also emphasize that stories in this case are not just data, they are interpretive acts. So, how a story is told reveals values, beliefs, and meaning processes. As we move forward, let us also explore the different types of uh, narrative analysis and narrative structure, showing how stories are systematically examined in qualitative research. So let's look at the types of narrative analysis. So this slide introduces the major forms of narrative analysis, including biographical studies, autobiographical studies, life histories, and even oral histories. Each focuses on stories as a way of understanding experience across time. The difference among these approaches lies in scope and voice. Some analyze an entire life, others focus on specific periods or events, and some rely on first-person written accounts, while others use interviews and archival materials. At a deeper level, we need to reinforce that narrative research treats people not as variables, but as meaning makers. The way individuals recount their experiences reveal how identity, memory, and context interact. To analyze these stories systematically, we need to understand how narratives are structured, which brings us to the next slide: narrative structure and analysis. So we break narratives into recognizable components: abstracts, orientation, complicating action, evaluation, resolution, and coda. These elements help researchers understand how stories are organized and interpreted. Analyzing structure allows researchers to see what participants emphasize, what they gloss over, and how they assign meaning to events. The evaluation section, in particular, reveals why a story matters to the teller. This also shows that stories in this case are not understood, are not random. They are carefully constructed interpretation. They are carefully in, carefully they are they are carefully constructed interpretations of experience. Narrative analysis uncovers both context and meaning. With narrative methods covered, we now turn to a different qualitative approach that bridges interpretation and systematic analysis. Content analysis. Content analysis is a systematic examination of text, documents, or media to identify patterns, themes, and meanings. It can be conducted qualitatively or quantitatively. Expanding on this, qualitative content analysis focuses on interpretation, understanding intent, context, and meaning. While quantitative content analysis counts and measures specific elements, this flexibility makes it useful for policy analysis, media studies, and document research. At a deeper level, this highlights that communication itself is data. Policy, news articles, social media posts, and institutional documents all reflect values, assumptions, and power structures. This explains the different approaches researchers can take in conducting content analysis. And we can see that in the next slide. So there are three approaches to content analysis: conventional, directed, and summative content analysis. Each varies in how theory is used. Expanding further, conventional content analysis allows categories to emerge from the data. Directed content analysis actually starts with existing theory, and summative analysis blends counting with interpretation. In this slide, we reinforce the importance of theoretical alignment. How you approach content analysis depends on what you already know and what you want to discover. With qualitative methodologies complete, let us synthesize key lessons from the entire qualitative section. Qualitative research key takeaways. Let's summarize the core principles of qualitative research. Matching method to purpose, embracing emergence, ensuring rigor, practicing reflexivity, and honoring context. The slide emphasizes that qualitative rigor comes from transparency, depth, and trustworthiness, not from standardization or sample size. We need to reframe qualitative research as a disciplined craft, one that requires patience, ethical sensitivity, and interpretive skill. With this foundation established, we are now ready to move beyond the quantitative divide. And that's where we talk about mixed method research designs. This signals a shift towards integrating quantitative and qualitative approaches within a single study. Expanding further, we take into consideration mixed method recognizes that some research questions are just too complex to be answered by numbers or narratives alone. By combining both, we are able to measure outcomes and understand processes. This represents a philosophical turning point. Mixed method embraces pragmatism, valuing what works to answer meaningful questions. As we move forward, the next slides will define mixed methods research and explain why it has become a powerful third methodological movement. Let's define mixed method research. Mixed method research is an intentional integration of quantitative and qualitative approaches within a single study to gain a more comprehensive understanding of research problem. Mixed method is not simply doing both. It requires purposeful integration, deciding where and why and how the two approaches inform each other. The goal is synergy, not duplication. This reflects the evolution of research thinking. As problems in education and society grow complex or more complex, researchers recognize that no single lens is sufficient. Mixed method allows us to measure outcomes while understanding processes. With the definition clear, let's explain what makes mixed method rather distinct. the core characteristics of mixed methods. The defining characteristics of mixed methods research includes integration, purpose-driven mixing, purpose-driven mixing, pragmatism, and meta-inferences. Integration can happen at multiple stages: design, data collection, analysis, or even interpretation. What matters is that findings are not kept separate but brought together meaningfully. Pragmatism emphasizes usefulness over philosophical purity. So mixed methods asks what combinations or of approaches best answers this question. Next, we explore the specific reasons researchers choose to mix methods. Rationale for mixed methods. This slide presents the key rationale for mixed methods: triangulation, complementarity, development, initiation, and expansion. Triangulation strengthens confidence in findings. Complementarity deepens understanding. Development allows one method to inform another. Initiation surfaces contradictions. And expansion broadens inquiry. This slide reinforces that mixed methods is about intentional design logic. Each rationale reflects a different way of thinking about evidence and understanding. Now that we know why methods are mixed, we now focus on how designs are structured. Key design considerations. We introduce critical mixed method design decisions that must be made: timing, priority, and integration strategy. Researchers must decide whether methods are collected sequentially or concurrently, whether one method dominates, and how data sets will be merged, connected, or embedded. At a deeper level, this emphasizes that mixed methods requires advanced planning, which means integration does not happen automatically. It must be designed deliberately. With these principles in mind, we now examine specific mixed method designs. Convergent parallel design. Convergent parallel design is where quantitative and qualitative data are collected simultaneously, analyzed separately, and then merged. This design is ideal when researchers want to compare results directly or validate findings across methods. Both data types are given equal importance. Convergent designs promote dialogue between numbers and narratives, allowing researchers to see where findings align or diverge. The next slide shows how this design works in real study. Convergent design example. This slide presents an example examining student engagement in online learning using surveys and interviews. Expanding on these, quantitative data identify patterns and predictors, while qualitative data explain experiences and meaning. Integration occurs when findings are compared and interpreted together. This example shows mixed methods in action. Statistics gain depth and stories gain scope. We now move to the sequential design that begins with numbers. Explanatory sequential design. In explanatory sequential design, quantitative data are collected first, followed by qualitative data to explain the results. This design is particularly useful when quantitative findings are unexpected or unclear. The qualitative phase helps interpret why patterns emerged. At a deeper level, this design reflects a curiosity-driven mindset, using one method to ask better questions, of the other. Next, let's explore the reverse sequence. This time, we begin with the quali and then we move to quanti. So, quantitative exploration and then uses the findings to build a quantitative phase. This design is especially useful when variables are unknown or existing instruments are inadequate. Qualitative insights guide survey or intervention development. This approach honors participant voice by allowing meaning to shape measurement. So let's give you a concrete example of the sequential design. So here, the slide provides an example of developing a teacher resilience scale, starting with interviews and ending with quantitative validation. Expanding on this, qualitative themes become measurable constructs tested across a larger population. Integration ensures theoretical grounding and empirical rigor. This example shows how mixed method bridges discovery and generalization. We now arrive at the final guidance for conducting strong mixed methodology research. Conducting rigorous mixed methods research. So there are three final principles worth emphasizing in the conduct of rigorous mixed method research. 1, justify the mixing. 2, plan integration points. And 3, address tensions. Expanding further, strong mixed methods clearly explain why integration is necessary, where it occurs, and how philosophical or practical tensions are managed. At a deeper level, this slide reinforces that mixed method is not easier. In fact, it is more demanding because it requires the rigor of both quantitative and qualitative research. Further, this study requires something more. It requires clarity, intentionality, and reflexivity. And that's it. You know why it's difficult to explain this course? For one, because it takes technically 4 or 5 semesters to finish a course on research methodology. And I technically did it in the time that is given to me. Uh, but nevertheless, it's okay. Uh, so let's close this one. As we reach the end of this section, it's worth remembering that research has never truly been about methods alone. It begins much earlier, at the moment you noticed something that didn't quite make sense, a pattern that raised questions, a story that felt incomplete, a problem that mattered enough to keep you awake at night. Research is born from that quiet discomfort, the feeling that what is can be understood more deeply, and perhaps changed for the better. Along the way, we encountered numbers that brought clarity, structure, and scale. Quantitative research taught us discipline, how to measure carefully, to test fairly, and to speak with precision. It reminds us that evidence matters, that claims require proof, and that rigor protects truth from assumption. Then we listen, really listen. Qualitative research invited us into lived experience, into classrooms, communities, cultures, and even lives. It taught us humility. It showed us that meaning cannot always be counted, that context shapes reality, and that voices, especially unheard ones, carry knowledge no statistics can replace. And finally, we learn to weave. Mixed methods showed us that understanding does not live in silos, that complexity demands courage, the courage to integrate, to hold session, to let numbers and narratives speak to one another. It taught us that the most powerful insights often emerge not from choosing one path, but from standing at the intersection. At the heart of all this is you, the researcher, not a technician, not a data collector, but a thoughtful, ethical, and curious human being making deliberate choices. Every design you choose reflect what you value. Every method you apply reveals what you believe knowledge should do. Every conclusion you draw carries consequences for policy, for practice, for people. So as you move forward, writing proposals, conducting studies, analyzing findings, remember this. Research is an act of responsibility. Research is an act of listening. Research is an act of hope. Hope that by asking better questions, by choosing wiser designs, and by honoring both evidence and experience, we can contribute not just to knowledge, but to understanding, justice, and meaningful change. May your research always be rigorous but never rigid. May it be grounded but never closed. And may it always remember the human stories behind the data. That is the true design of real, real and impactful work. We're done with the second lecture for today. Thank you very much for listening.